Welcome to the next lesson here in this module. We're going to be looking at the Zapier apps. These are apps that are native to Zapier's platform. They're built by Zapier and they can be used in a ton of different use cases when it comes to ChatGPT outputs. Just so you're aware of all the apps that are available, we got all this list right here, and you're going to be able to really use a ton of different stuff when it comes to ChatGPT and these specific apps, such as the RSS feed, the paths, the scheduler, the formatter, and so on. So let's go ahead and walk through a couple of these and see good use cases that we will need to use in an AI automation agency. Looking at the first one here, it's going to be scheduled by Zapier. This is going to allow you to essentially set up AI automations that run on specific trigger events. So their events is either every day, every hour, every month, every week. A lot of context of why you would use a schedule by Zapier for ChatGPT would be more for content generation, as this typically aligns with social media schedules. Furthermore, another good context to run something like a scheduler would be for data searching. So for example, let's say we run a scheduler every Sunday, and then you're looking for specific messages found within a Slack channel, specific inputs found within a Google Excel, and so on. Now let's go ahead and pair the schedule by Zapier with paths in order to create a really cool social media schedule. And in order to do so, we would just add another step here. We'll make it paths. And essentially paths are, think of them like multiple filters. So depending on whether it passes through the quote unquote filter, as you see here, it will proceed with the automation. So in the context of creating a social media schedule, let's just say that we go ahead and set this scheduler to every single day it's triggered. Hit continue here. Time of day, we'll just say midnight. Continue. We're going to test this trigger. And as you see here, the data that's provided is that it gives us pretty day of the week. So let's say we run a social media schedule, but we only want to post on Monday, Wednesday, Friday. What we need to do is come to our path A here, and we would say essentially pretty day of the week exactly matches Monday. Therefore, that when Monday and this trigger occurs, it will continue and it'll go down this path. So let's go ahead and say that we want to keep whatever content's being generated on this path the same. We're going to say an or statement here. We're going to say pretty day of the week exactly matches Tuesday. So essentially, every time it's Tuesday or Monday, it will go down this flow. Let's say for Friday, we have a different piece of content and we still want it to get triggered. We'll do the same thing here. Exactly matches Friday. And as you see here, it won't work because it's not Friday today. But what's great, and what we set up here essentially, is that every Monday, Tuesday, Friday, this flow will run, and that could be your social media content schedule. So another by Zapier tool we can use here is RSS. Now, RSS is going to be pretty fundamental when you're dealing with a client that either has a podcast or some type of content feed that they've linked to an RSS feed. Using an RSS feed, all you really need to do is either do new item in feed or a new item in multiple feeds, depending on the context. Hit continue, and then you would just input the business's feed URL here, and then everything following that we can ask and proctor with ChatGPT. Now, as a real quick rule of thumb and really cool thing you can do with ChatGPT is, let's say you run an RSS feed, and for that specific feed, you want to look for a very specific type of content that occurs within that feed. We're going to go ahead and create a conversation here. Within this conversation, we're going to simply put based on the new item in the feed. You do parentheses, and then you would just input the data point right here. I'm going to enter generate yes. We do semicolons yes or semicolon no on whether it has to do with cars. As an example, whatever the business context you may be in, you would put that there. And essentially what we can do here is we can use 3.5 because we'll be able to understand just the sediments and the data within that feed. Hit continue here, and whether it's yes or no will depend on whether the flow continues. If it's yes, then all we would need to do essentially is continue the flow, but to ensure that it doesn't continue no matter what, we would add a filter block here, and we'll say based off the assistant response message. So let's go ahead and just test this action. We would want it to say exactly matches no. Now in this context, that did come out a little bit longer because we didn't provide an RSS feed. But in the context we did, it essentially would just output either yes or no, allowing you to do more of data analysis in a potential flow. Now, a really powerful block you can also use in Zapier is a code block. Now, I see using code blocks more in other use cases when it has to do with other apps Rarely do you ever find yourself really needing to use a code block in the context of, ensuring an output for ChatGPT. Most likely you will be putting outputs into the event here. So essentially what I mean by that is that within the code itself, you would put an output from ChatGPT. Rarely do you ever find yourself needing to proctor something. This is more for advanced AI automations that require you to kind of manipulate the outputs of third-party apps. I'll show you a really good use case for this in our AI article generator video. Now, another by Zapier app that you can start utilizing within your flows is going to be a delay. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would I use a delay in the context of AI automation? Do I want it to be fast? Well, there are some use cases for that. So think of it this way. Let's say you had an AI auto-generated email for a specific customer. When a customer sends that email, you shouldn't be responding to it right away. Using a delay block, we can mimic human behavior here. Maybe add an hour delay, 2-hour delay, 30 minutes, 50 minutes, and so on. This is going to allow you to take AI automation flows and mimic more human behavior, which could be useful in certain use cases depending on the AI automation. Another cool app provided by Zapier is the storage app. I really like using this one. This one essentially allows you to take data that's been generated from one flow and then pass it to another one. So what do I mean by that? Essentially what you can do is, let's say there is a pertinent piece of information, an ID, a specific output from ChatGPT that needs to be taken and given to another flow that occurs later on in the process, but they're two separate zaps. How do I do that? Essentially what you do is this. You will go ahead and say set value, continue here. You'll give a key. This is we're going to call upon it. We're just going to call it GPT-4. This could be anything. So we'll do GPT-4D. The value that you want to save for the other flow. So we'll go ahead and just save the assistant response message, continue, test that action, and then we're going to go ahead and save that. So when you create the other AI automation, so in the other Zap, how you call upon that is simply doing another storage block. Let's say get value, continue, and then remember we named our key GPT-4D. Hit continue here, and then this should show up as what we had earlier. Perfect, it does, and that's how I grabbed the data from one Zapier flow and passed it to another. So another cool feature Zapier has is a web parser. So this is going to allow you to grab information from the internet that may be relevant to what you're doing. So an example of this could be possibly that within your AI automation, you get the link for an article that was just created, or there was a link found within an email. You're going to want to go ahead and use the parse web page. You would provide the URL there that you find, and essentially it would parse it out in HTML, Markdown, or plain text. And from there, on that output, you'll be able to use GPT to analyze it and give a specific formatted output of whatever you wish. Now let's get to the very famous one here, which is probably going to be the one you use a lot within your AI automations, which is going to be the formatter by Zapier. Now the formatter allows you to do a couple of things such as date, time, numbers, text, and utilities. Essentially, whatever you plan on manipulating is what you're going to be choosing for the event. Most of the times when dealing with ChatGPT and AI automations, it's going to be text. Next, we have the option to transform. So this is going to be all the different things we can do with that underlying output. So knowing so, let's go ahead and run through some use cases. We're going to go ahead and structure this prompt again. We're going to go ahead and say, generate 2 social media captions for an ice cream company. And we can go ahead and keep this at GPT 3.5 as it's not too important. Let's go ahead and just see what these outputs would look like. All right, perfect. So as you see here, we got 2 outputs. We got the first caption and the second caption. Let's go ahead and use the formatter. But one thing I want to show you y'all real quick is that if you're having issues with the formatter and you're really trying to do something, but you can't really understand or know how to do it, there's one new thing that Zapier had added, which essentially allows you to format the data using AI. This isn't perfect, but it can help in some use cases. So essentially what you would do is you'd come to the assistant response message, you'd hit format data here, and essentially it asks in layman terms what you want to change. So in this context, since I see those quotation marks, I could ask it, remove the quotation marks from text. So then it will try to interpret that and try to make its own formatter block with Zapier. So let's go ahead and see if it was correct. So it was correct in this use case. So if I hit continue here and test this action, it would remove the quotation marks. Now, this feature isn't perfect, but it could lead you in the right direction. So I might as well show you it. So in order to do that without the underlying use case of the AI, we're gonna go ahead and just do replace. So essentially what the replace function does, which can be very useful in multiple use cases, is that it will find the specific character that you're looking to replace here, such as a quotation mark, and then you would be able to replace it with either empty space or an actual space, depending on your context. So we hit continue and test this action. Also note, in order to call upon certain functions, you're going to have to use their phrasing. So as you see here, this is how you call upon an actual space, a tab, a new line, and return. That is one use case to use formatter. There is another one here called split. So what I like to do with split is if there is a long data output, sometimes you want to have it so the data isn't just one block to call upon. And what I mean by that is essentially notice how this assistant response message is both captions in one data piece. So in order to make it so that it is two captions in two separate data pieces, what we're going to do here is we're going to go ahead and give the output again. And this may take a couple tries here, but let's go ahead and try the first function here as I showed earlier, which is going to be new line. So we're going to go ahead and format it like it likes it. We're going to do segment index here. And what's very important here is that we're going to do all separate fields. This is going to allow it to be separate data points. We're going to test this action. And there you go. As you see, we have two separate data points. And what do I mean by that? Essentially, if I come over here, go and delete that. We got the formatted text. We got output item 1, shift, output item 2. If I didn't format it like that and I just did the original ChatGPT message, it would have kept the two captions together. But in some context, you need to separate data so it isn't just one block. Now, there are other use cases that I've used in the past, such as the capitalized one. That's really cool. Essentially, all that really does is that it'll take the underlying text and then capitalize every single word. There we go. Every single one of these words have been capitalized. There are other really cool functions, such as extracting an email address from a block of text, extracting a number, extracting a phone number, looking for length of a text, getting the word count for the text if that is important in some use cases. From what I've shown, this essentially allows you to do a lot of functions when manipulating the underlying data found within the ChatGPT output. Now, one thing I'll point out is that if you want to do something very, very complex with that underlying output and you can't seem to proctor it from ChatGPT, that will typically require you to use a code block. But what's great about code blocks is it does allow you to use AI as well. As you see here, you can generate with AI. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If it doesn't work, then what I typically like to do is either use ChatGPT and Stack Overflow or just use ChatGPT 4 in general and really proctor answers for whatever you're trying to achieve. For reference, currently all Zapier uses is either Python or JavaScript. Okay, I hope you learned something about the Zapier blogs and why they're so fundamental for specific use cases when it comes to AI automation. There was one main one that we did not mention, and that was webhooks. That's because in the next lesson here, we have a whole video dedicated to webhooks as it's more complex, but honestly, it's one of the more valuable ones to learn about because of the fact that it's going to allow us to do custom actions within Zapier's interface. So, let's go ahead and learn how we do API calls and really understand more complexities when it comes to AI automations.